Hey, listeners, thanks for tuning in again to another episode of The Marketing Share. I'm here with my co host, Barb. If you're a first time listener, thanks for joining in to our show. If you're a repeat listener and you're back for more content, we also appreciate that so much. Either way, if you like what you hear, please do give us a follow or a subscribe on whatever platform you use. That really, really helps us out, and we super appreciate that. Also, before we jump into the topic today, want to give a quick acknowledgement to our sponsors, Socialize Video. They are an agency that specializes in digital and video content. So if you're a business looking for help in that area, please check out socialize.video and tell them that the Marketing Share sent you there. Okay, so on to today's topic. This has been on the docket for like a little over a month, I think, and been super excited about our today's content and our guest. We're going to be talking about two things really. One is account-based management and where ABM is evolving and how it's evolving. But then secondly, also a little bit about marketing leadership, because our guest today, Latane Conant with CMO with Sixth Sense, has a wealth of experience in both, and we are really excited to have her on to share her perspectives and to talk us a little bit about both of these topics. Barb, I'm going to flip it over to you to give our listeners a little bit more of the formal introduction to Latane.
Super excited to have Latane here. And Latane's also co-host of our CMO Coffee Talk, which has been such a great community. Yay. Thanks for being on. And also, Latane, of course, is a best-selling author. The book, I've dog-eared this book completely. It's called No Forms, No Spam, No Cold Calls. And she's really passionate about forging a new way for marketing leaders to get a little smarter about how we engage with our valuable prospects. And not just leads, right? How we convert into deals. That's really the focus. She's known all of the industry for her creativity, competitiveness, and boundless energy. Welcome, Latane.
Barb, Alex, so glad to be here. And I'm excited to share my experiences with people, and hopefully they can take something away to help them out.
Latane, just tell us, how did you get started with this? What was the impetus of the book? How do you continue to really forge this new path? And tell us the why and the how it all came about.
So I was an accounting major so that I would never have to write a paper in college. So the fact that I have a book is a small miracle. But, they say that you write the book you wish you had. And I feel like that was essentially what I did. And I found myself, as we were forging this new path with Project Bold Moves, which is really what No Forms, No Spam, No Cold Calls is about. It's about a project that we did for ourselves. I kept writing these long emails to people trying to explain what we were doing and attaching templates and sending Google Docs out that showed, this is our template and this is how we do this and this is what worked and this is what didn't work. And finally, I'm like, I need to save myself some time and put it all in one place. And so that's how the book manifested. It is the all in one place of really what we did here at Sixth Sense. And it's the cornerstone of our growth story, is really the philosophy of putting prospects who are future customers. Everyone talks about customer experience. No one talks about the prospect experience, but we all know, and I'm sure our parents told me, I'm sure they told you, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And we have this great opportunity, I think, to do a lot better and provide prospects with the type of experience we would want when we go to buy products and services in our own jobs. And so that was really like how it all manifested.
I love that. The subtitle of your book is something along the lines of, next generation approach to ABM. So for our listeners who have heard about ABM, but maybe have never really delved deep into it, because I think ABM is actually one of these terms where when you first hear the words account-based management, if you've never done it, it sounds reasonable if you can kind of figure out what it is. But then once you actually try to, yeah, you're responsible for deploying it, you realize there's actually a lot more to it. It's not as straightforward as the name sounds. So can you just give a little bit of an explanation of, what was ABM before, but then really more importantly, what is this next gen version of ABM that you're talking about in this book and that you've been championing?
Honestly, I think ABM is just good marketing these days. Hard stop. Because for so long, and really this kind of was out of the 90s, the solutions that we had was a marketing automation solution, right? And so we built our process around a marketing automation solution, which at the time was revolutionary. So, all good. But I like to say, while 1990s jeans might be back in, the marketing is not, because what it is it's about a landing page and a form to collect an email, to put them into a nurture, which is really just a ton of spam, to come up with a point system that we create ourselves, to deem something an MQL, declare victory, and pass to sales. And what's hysterical to me is people will brag about, oh, we do all these MQLs, and I'm like, but we make up our own scoring system. So it's sort of like, it's a little goofy to me. It's like, everybody gets a trophy, right? So I think that when you think about today and marketers wanting a seat at the table, marketers wanting to be closer to revenue, we have to zoom out for a second and say, how productive is what we're really doing? And I think that the context that you have to look at is how does a B2B buy actually happen? And the reality is a B2B buy doesn't happen from someone coming to your website, filling out a form, and doing an order form, right? It's not e-commerce, right? So if you're in e-commerce or maybe even PLG, maybe this doesn't apply. But if you are a considered purchase and there are 3 people on a buying team plus for you, this applies. And our research shows that only 2 to 3% of website visitors fill out a form. So hard stop. And that's if you get a ton of website traffic or you get minimal. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's 3%. So you can sit there and say, I'm going to make my forms smarter. I'm going to make more forms. I'm going to work on converting the forms. I'm going to do this. And maybe you're listening and you're saying, oh, well, we're crushing it. We're at 5%. It's still not the 90-some%. So we have to deal with the 90-some% that is anonymous. And then we also have to know that a lead is one contact. And the fastest way to increase your win rates is to make sure that you are engaging with multiple buyers on the buying team. And so when we pass a lead, which is just a contact to sales, we're actually queuing up a loss. So what we have to do is pass an account with multiple contacts engaged to sales. So we start to pass the beginnings of a win. So those are just a few of the fundamentals. I'll stop. I can tell you guys both have comments. So.
No, we're just nodding because we're so in agreement. And I think one of the things that, I don't know why it took this, but account-based marketing, it's really, it doesn't mean you're going after only fewer accounts. I know a lot of times that ends up happening, but really what it really means is you're focused on the entire account, not just a single lead.
Yeah.
So I think even that, relatively simple distinction is an important thing for marketing leaders to really understand, that if that's the approach, if that's your business model, your revenue model, then that's when ABM really works for you, and that's how you have to do it. So I like how you make that distinction so clear.
The other thing I think that why I say it's just good marketing is good marketing has always been about great segmentation, right? It's about not treating everybody the same. It's about understanding, personas and needs and wants and buying journeys. And so to me, what account-based did is it said, really think about your segmentation and how to, and not all segments are created equal, and not all should have the same approach. And so a lot of times what I tell our customers is I say, it's just as much who you focus on as who you don't. What are the accounts that you're going to spend not a lot of time and not a lot of money on? Like define that too, right? Because we have limited calories to expend. And so it's really understanding like what are the most important segments that we invest in and how we invest in them as equally as the ones we don't.
Yeah, as a customer myself and as a marketer myself, I can really relate to these audiences because let's face it, I'm afraid to put my name into a form fill now. It gives me trepidation because I know I'm going to get hawked and stalked.
You will.
I don't want that.
Yeah,
anymore,
hawked
right?
and stalked. I love that.
I just, that makes me, gives me a nervous feeling completely, right? So think about this buyer journey that you're on and think about how 70% of them choose to remain anonymous from the book, right? So, I mean, that to me is they are raising their hand and they're speaking for themselves. They're not willing to be involved right now, right? So let me ask you this, because nobody wants to incorporate forms and spam and emails if they don't have to, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of this approach then depends upon being able to identify intent for someone, really being able to tease out who those people really are in market. Can you speak to that? Because that's kind of the magic behind this book.
Yeah. And, intent is a term that gets tossed around a lot. So I just want to go through the different types of intent for listeners so that when they hear it, they can say, oh, okay, I know what we're talking about here. So it's intent to purchase, right? And you're trying to gauge within an account which ones are more ready to buy than others. And there's many different types of intent signals. One of the most important forms of intent, I believe, is who's on your website. That's called first party intent. And I told you 97% you don't maybe know about today. So if you don't do anything from this, I would try to get some sort of first party intent on your website. That is demand that you have already paid for. You have paid for that demand. So it's irresponsible, I think, not to know about it. That's first party intent. Second party intent is not applicable to all industries. It's most applicable to tech, but it is like review sites, right? So if you're out comparing and contrasting 6 Sense to our competitors, it's a website about 6 Sense, but I don't own it. So I call that second party G2, Trust Radius, etc. Also, good intent to have. And then there's third party intent. Third party intent is providers like 6 Sense. We're not the only ones. There's others, Bombora, there's others out there where we are actually scraping all of these sites and using natural language processing to understand what keywords accounts are researching or what topics. And so this is an earlier stage of intent that's going to tell you, you know what, Latane, these accounts are all researching account-based marketing or intent data or predictive analytics or AI in marketing, right? So I can track all these keywords and topics that would indicate that you're interested, right? So that's pretty important data to have. And then the last one that I've been talking more about, and is actually, I don't think in the book, is pre-intent data. And so thinking about what would someone do, an account do, or a person do to indicate that they have a need or a pain. So maybe they start posting jobs. Mm-hmm. Maybe they are buying companies. that would indicate they're going to have a need if you provide like deal desk portals or something, right? Or maybe they're buying other technology, right? You buy a sales engagement platform, you're going to need 6sense. So I track all those, right? What are they blogging about and indicating in their own CEO messages, things like that. And so that's kind of the breadth and depth of intent data. I think the more the merrier. I think you want to amass it. Then the challenge becomes, okay, now I've got all this data. How do I turn that data into intelligence? And that's where I think, AI can really help you discern, what's just noise and what's signal, to have a better understanding of who's actually ready to buy. That's how I think about intent data.
So, a couple follow-up questions on that, Latane. So, that third-party intent data, how good do you think that technology is today? I mean, I'm sure it keeps getting better all the time, but where would you say that is these days?
Well, it depends on the provider.
Of course.
I mean, Forrester did a nice job. They just came out with a wave that I think does a nice job explaining the things you want to look for. You want to look for like where they source their data. You want to look for how an intent provider, again, teases out signal from noise. I think you want to be able to track keywords as well as topics, because as a marketer, I like keywords, because if your keyword is predictive analytics, then I can then send you an ad that has predictive analytics and content that has predictive analytics. So it really helps, I think, with relevance, versus a broad topic like, marketing best practices, for example, right? So I like to be able to track both. And then it's all about I think if you're looking at an intent provider, a good provider will allow you to test, right? So they'll allow you to put in some keywords or some topics and just see, are we picking up enough signal to make this worthwhile?
And now I know that, this depends. And of course, there's a million different things that I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you, right? So if you do go down this path, forge this new path, and actually take advantage of this market intelligence, perhaps do, business with a company like 6sense, et cetera, what can somebody expect on the lift side of the business? I know it's all across the board, but from the top of the funnel to down through the funnel, what are just some of the guidelines that people can expect to win rates and,
No, it's a great question. So what we do is we actually track all of our customers, and every quarter we look at the data, and then we aggregate kind of like what results people can expect. And what's interesting is the biggest needle movers that we see are in win rates. So 20% better conversions,
nice
cycle times, 30% faster cycle times, and ASPs. So that's the, average selling, whatever you call it, contract value, whatever, but 2 times bigger, bigger deal sizes. And then of course there's an increase in pipeline. What's interesting though, is you may have less leads. And that freaks people out. Right? So you just have to set the expectation that we might have less leads, or our leads might convert less, because we are going to be more stringent about passing accounts. And we're actually going to put more effort in working the things that are going to yield these better win rates and these better ASPs. And we're going to be okay not working, or working in a low touch manner, the things that won't, it's interesting as marketers, right, we do a webinar and we're like, why isn't sales following up on the webinar attendees? And it's like, because they're probably not going to convert, I mean, and it's not bad. I'm not saying don't do webinars, but that's not a qualified account for sales. Now, if somebody attended a webinar and went to your website a bunch of times and was researching competitive keywords, that starts to get more interesting, right? So it's like helping see the patterns versus just one event that could be an anomaly. Like maybe they're looking for a job and they wanted to attend the webinar. Who
So
knows?
definitely a quality over quantity story then, right? This
Yes.
is what it,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
for sure. For sure.
How does, okay, so I know, this allows you to get rid of, forms and things like that, but I'm assuming though that you still take this information, but you can now be smarter about how you do some of the other marketing tactics. So like you just throw out webinars. Are you saying like, hey, you just don't need to do webinars anymore? Or it's more like, hey, there's a smarter way for you to target who to invite to the webinar?
No, I think webinars are great,
Yeah.
right? But I think that this should, like, one of the things that we do is we look at the deals that we win and what were their top intent keywords, and it's changed dramatically.
Hmm.
And every quarter, okay, if this is a top intent keyword, shouldn't that be the topic of our webinars? Why are we just pulling
Right.
out of wherever
Right.
what the webinar should be about, right? Looking at personas. What's a persona's top keyword? And that informs our content strategy. It informs our ad copy. It informs our outbound team and what they outbound with. So I talk about these like 4 factors of relevance. And, I don't care pick your poison, right, for a tactic. But I think you want to look at the account. Why is this an account a good fit for you? And then the inverse of that, why are you uniquely suited to a manufacturer or a automotive dealer or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fit of the account. Then there's the persona fit. How are you going to help this person do their job better? Then there's their timing. If they're early stage, a webinar is cool. If they're late stage, you probably want to get them to a demo, right? So what's their timing? That should dictate the tactic and the message. And then what's their keywords? What do they actually care about? And I think when you start to put those things together, then like everything is better, and that helps deliver a better experience because you're being relevant. Like, who cares that I live in Chicago? I don't like I get a lot of like, go Cubs. I'm like, I think baseball's boring. So that's not going to entice me to take a meeting with you, right? But you talk about like using generative AI in your content strategy. That's really interesting. That's relevant to what I'm trying to do right now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I think about it.
Makes you a smarter marketer, much smarter. Yeah, yeah. Does this approach work for all size companies? Is there just the way it is right now? And I'm not trying to specifically ask about 6 Sense, more just in general, right? Can this work, or is the technology available to all different types of companies?
Yeah, I think if you want to be a revenue oriented marketer, starting with the data and the insights is critical. And it is actually a little easier to adopt if you're a smaller company. There's less change management, I would say, like start with the end in mind type of a thing. The one caveat to that, I would say, is there is a certain amount of savviness that you need to have around like data and things like that. And so, one of my initial hires would be marketing ops anyway. So I think that should be a first hire, but I think that's critical for this. And then, take intent out of the equation. I think a lot of companies fail because they don't understand their market. They've built a product and they haven't thought about, is there a market for this product? Do we have product market fit? And what is our ideal customer profile? And is it big enough or is it too big, right? And so, I always say, I already gave you the pro tip about knowing who's on your website. The second pro tip is like ideal customer profile. who is your ideal customer profile? And a lot of times investors love it when you say you have a huge TAM. And I love that too. Long term, you want a huge TAM. But if you have 3 salespeople, pointing them at a huge TAM is not going to work, right? Yeah. So what are those slivers of huge TAM, but who's ideal and who's ideal for us right now? And right sizing the ideal customer profile with your growth goals and your sales territories is absolutely critical. And that is not that should be like a company-wide commitment to what are those ideal customer profiles and how do we do the territories and things like that. Because the second you hire a salesperson and create a territory, like you have a responsibility to that individual as a company to get them pipeline and have a product that they can sell and that you can service.
Yeah. I love that advice. I love those ones that where you, from experience, you can speak to both sides, right? Because there's the thing you talked about, like, yes, you want to have a huge product, a target market, but having a huge target market, but having no clarity on who you're going to go after is a killer.
Like, what am I going to do today?
Yeah, exactly. Great. Huge target market. Awesome. But where are we going to point our guns? Like, yeah. And that's one of those dichotomies that I think is hard to learn. And it's great to hear from experience that, no, you got to be sharp on this. You need to know the distinction. So I love that advice.
Why don't you jump in and talk about the revenue ops right there? Because you mentioned it. Let's talk about it right now because, people are some people have this in their organization, believe in it, passionately. Other people do not. Give me the guidance on revenue ops and being part of the organization.
Yeah, I just think that having, and there's a couple ways to set it up, right? You can have revenue ops and within that marketing, sales, CS ops. You can have revenue ops that's more of like a coalition and, or you can have revenue. There's multiple ways to do it. But I think that creating a culture around data and insights and processes that leverage the data and insights and then report back on performance starts with revenue ops. And so however you set that up and whoever owns it, hire someone amazing. Like that is the difference maker between flailing around and being successful. So like recruit the best of the best, like forego a sales headcount to have a strong, operations and analytics function.
Do you think it needs to be in marketing or sales or like just whatever makes most sense? Do you have a take on that?
I do. It's a little different than what was in the book, actually. I now advise CMOs not to give up their marketing ops person.
Okay.
And because a lot of times, HR, finance will say, well, they should why wouldn't it all be in one thing? And And I just think that that's such a critical business partner for you. And so what I do is my counter to that is I say, oh, well, marketing ops, it's actually campaigns because they have the map. And so it needs to be in marketing. And then people are like, no one really knows what that means. And so they're like, okay, that seems like right. So whatever. But I wouldn't give up those Legos. I would keep those Legos.
Nice. I love that.
Love it.
You had one of the cartoons or whatever in the book that I absolutely love because I've actually sat in this meeting before, right? Where a marketing person is going through 7,000 measurements that they measure in the organization. And the CEO turns around and goes, it's a simple question. Was the campaign profitable for the company? Right? I mean, that is literally, I've been in the room when that happens, right? So it is mission critical to get our marketing measurement correct. And revenue is a great way to do it. And the holy grail is predictable revenue for sure. But what do you tell people to keep it simple and how to measure? And what are the main things that you're pointing at for a company to keep it simple and yet keep it relevant?
So the reality is you actually need to know all those details, whether you share them or not. You actually don't, but you need to know website traffic, conversion rates, win rates by site. Like, you need to know all that. And I think a lot of marketing leaders fail thinking, oh, that's too much in the weeds, blah, 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 blah. But I think part of being a leader is a level of understanding every single function and the KPIs by function. But because marketing is so diverse, no one really cares about the KPIs within one function of marketing. So your job is to really boil it up in a language that they can understand. And so anything that you spend a lot of money on, you need to tie back to some business result. And when I say business result, maybe it's website traffic. Maybe it's, guys, no one even knows about us. We just want to get website visitors, right? And right now we get 2 a day and we want to get hundreds a day. So did the campaign work? Did we get hundreds a day? Yeah. Okay, fine, right? If you're later stage, it's going to be more, did we source pipeline? Did we influence pipeline? We're our customer conference, it's all about renewals. Like, do people come to the conference and then renew? And guess what? We have 100% renewal rate for customers that come to the conference, right? So what's the rate? It's, here's my business objective. Here's what I'm going to spend before you do it. And does that math add up? And then afterwards, you're going to need to go back and tie it out. And it's okay to kill stuff. You actually get respect. Like saying, no, the campaign wasn't a success. We're not doing it again. We cut it. Like, that will get you street cred every time. So that's one aspect. The thing about marketing is the budget is really diverse. And so it's hard to say, did the $500 here or $2,000 there? So it's a lot of like bits and bobs. So that's where, again, you need to know the bits and bobs and how you're optimizing. But at a macro level, everyone understands a quota. So create a quota, right? My quota for pipeline is $30 million this month. I hit 32. It was a good month. I hit 27. It was a bad month. So, and here's why. And so here's what we need to do next month so we can hit our quota. I mean, everyone understands that, right? So it's like, and if you do it based on the pipeline quotas, there's an inherent counterbalance versus the MQLs, because you have to know your win rates, right? Because if your win rates dip, you got to create more pipeline. So the understanding the math around the quotas is really kind of what you need to do. And then everyone looks at you and says, how are we going to perform in 3 quarters? And the only one that can answer that is you, because you know how much pipeline you created now, and you know how long it takes, what your ASPs are and what your cycle times are. And you can then become the predictor of future outcomes. Whereas the head of sales has to really predict this quarter, maybe next.
Yeah.
This is kind of like how you always talk about being the chief market officer,
yes,
instead of just marketing. And I even love it. I think that's your official, or you put that as your title.
Yeah.
For you, CMO means chief market officer.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I think every time you say that, I'm like inside, I'm cheering so much, because I think that's so important to understand that it's way more than just the marketing activities, but it's the market, right? I don't know. I know you probably have a lot of thoughts on that, or more thoughts on that, but maybe speak to that a little bit more if you could, or why do you feel like that's so important, and where do you see that happening actually? Do you feel like it's shifting a little bit?
Yeah. And I've had some chief market officer titles, and people who, it's a little hard to change your title midway through. especially if I just didn't ask. So, but I have seen people, when you go for an interview and are getting new gigs, using that, because it's a much stronger position than I'm going to generate leads, right? It's like, I'm going to be the seat at the table that understands the market, and that is going to materialize through higher quality pipeline, win rates, ASP. Like I have this blog that says, marketers, you're more than just an MQL. And I don't want to bash MQL. Like it's a signal. Think of it at MQL as an intent signal. It's fine. It's not an end result, right? But I think you should start to measure the success or failure of yourself based on, what's our competitive win rate? What's our non-competitive win rate? Right. And that speaks to holistically, are we targeting the right accounts? Are we getting meetings with the right accounts? Are we nailing our first meeting? Does our messaging about our product resonate? All of those things that we do, and I think a good way to, if you want to be a chief market officer, I think be the voice in the room that really understands the ideal customer profile better than anybody else. Know win rates, know why you win, why you lose. A win-loss program is a great way to do that, but also look at the data. Analyze cohorts of won deals versus lost deals, so you can talk about it. Understand competitors and the competitive landscape. So, use whatever you're listening, whether it's Gong or another one, listen, what competitors are coming up in our deals this quarter and how is that changing? Those are some of the things, I talked about intent keywords and search keywords, and, those are the patterns that I think a chief market officer brings to the company, to sales, to product, to say, what are we, let's make sure we're positioned well to win a market.
Yeah. You're almost like the chief intelligence officer of the whole company on how to move the growth forward, right? You're kind of the growth engine chief officer as well. Let me ask you this question, because, as I was reading your book and I was thinking about coming into an organization and creating a bold new move, right?
Yeah.
That's a big job, especially in, an established organization for sure. I'm thinking about, there's so much movement at CMO level, coming into an organization and really trying to move the needle in a different way, or trying some new approaches and those kinds of things. In your book, you talked a lot about the foundations that you need for trust in the organization and those kinds of things. How important is that in creating a bold new move in your company? And you talked to a little bit about your team that was so instrumental in that. Just speak a little bit about that, because I think, when you're new to a role, taking a risk can be, a little bit nerve-wracking for that new CMO, yet they're also expected to make those bold moves. So talk to that foundation.
I think that people thrive on high expectations. And, my parent, like I am lucky in that my parents always gave me a gift of high expectations. And so I pass that forward to my children, to my husband, to my friends, to my colleagues, of, I see something maybe bigger in yourself than you see. And you can be that. And so I think it's about, holding yourself accountable to high expectations, but then the people around you, and that feels good, like no one wants to, who wouldn't want to work on a project called Bold Moves? And, but then the other thing is, like, I live it. Like I get in the weeds, like I'm okay to like get my hands dirty or whatever. And, that's how I find understanding of what's really happening. And so, And that's kind of the fun of marketing, is it is so diverse that there's always something new to learn. So I think just being passionate about learning and having high expectations of yourself and kind of raging against mediocrity is like, that's why people go into marketing, I think.
Really sage advice, I think, from this, especially in the second half. I think you got a lot of nuggets of wisdom just from practical standpoint, but I also love just more of the leadership insights that you sharing. So really appreciate that. And then going back to the first part, also just the breakdown of what ABM is and what intent is. So thank you so much for sharing this level of information. I think there's going to be a lot of value. I think a lot of people are going to come out of this feeling a little bit more comfortable knowing that, oh, okay, this is what's possible. And this is also what I'm shooting for. So thank you so much. I don't know, Barb, if you have any closing thoughts, but I thought this was
rage
great.
against mediocrity is my new battle cry. Okay. And I think that is brilliant. Latane, thanks so much for being with us. That was awesome. And we loved hearing your insights, and I know people will really enjoy this episode. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Love being on the show.